Welcome to the Escape into Board Games podcast.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
And this is our escape from the real world where we talk about board games. In this episode, we talk about board games based on intellectual properties.
So please join us for the Escape into Board Games podcast. Remember the days when the phrase IP game sent shivers down our spines for all the wrong reasons? Well, cast aside those bad memories because times have changed, and so have our tabletop experiences.
In this episode, we're unraveling the intriguing trend that has reshaped the landscape of board gaming, the surge of high-quality board games inspired by our favorite movies, TV shows, books, and more.
It wasn't always smooth sailing for IP games. The not-so-distant past was littered with lackluster adaptations that left us questioning the marriage of beloved franchises and tabletop gameplay. A recent revolution has given birth to some truly exceptional games.
Join us as we explore this exciting shift, analyzing what makes these games shine and what it reveals about the evolving board game industry. The transformation of IP games reflects the industry's commitment to delivering not just nostalgia, but top-tier entertainment.
In this episode, From Page to Play, we make a case for being in the renaissance of remarkable IP board games. Chris, do you have any examples of horrible IP games in your past?
You know, I actually don't. I have a couple that I like that have fond memories of. One of the games that really sticks out in my head was Happy Days.
Oh my.
The board game Happy Days.
Wow.
With like this cartoon picture of the fawns on it. And it's basically just this roll and move game. And you land on this board and then you read a card. Spend $4 on your date. Collect 3 cool points. Yeah, there was nothing really interesting in it.
For sure.
But the art and the board itself, like it fit the world.
Yeah.
And I have fond memories of the game. It was just a bad game as far as I can remember. But I have fond memories of it. Like the cards were like, you know, cruising and drag racing or something like that was on it. It had like paper money and stuff like that.
Did you jump the shark at any point?
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't remember that at all. I wasn't even that big of a Happy Days fan. I guess we watched it a lot.
It was on all the time.
Yeah, it was everywhere. And so we watched it. Yeah, I remember that game quite a bit.
1976, Happy Days.
Yeah, 1976.
Chris, it's got a 4.7 on Board Game Geek.
4.7.
I think your memory of it might be a little skewed.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't a good game.
When my kids were little, we were given secondhand games. And I remember one in particular was a Spider-Man game. And basically it was like Russian roulette because Spider-Man was this contraption and you wind it up and he might punch or he might not punch, and it was basically like this crappy plastic toy in a board game box. There's no game to it, obviously, right? It was just somebody paid a lot of money to be able to use the Spider-Man logo, and it was just so disappointing.
There certainly was a lot of that. Yeah. Like I do remember, you know, certain games going, oh wow, look, there's a game of that, there's a game of this, and just being really unimpressed with the way.
Yeah.
Like it looked cool because it was this really exciting IP, right? Like
yeah.
There was an X-Men game in the 2000s or something like that. It was like, oh, an X-Men game, that's great. And you read sort of what you're doing, and it's like, oh, that doesn't really work for me.
It's like Snakes and Ladders, but with little X-Men miniatures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really working for me.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's all the Uno variants.
Yeah.
That are just like the game with different pictures on the cards.
Yeah. And then Monopoly started a lot of IP games.
Yeah, that's another example of...
I'm not sure exactly when that happened, but it was like, you know, all of a sudden there was Monopoly this, Monopoly that. And
yeah, Game of Thrones, Monopoly. And...
yeah, it had nothing to do with the theme, the IP, the story.
Yeah.
It was just Monopoly with, you know...
different named properties.
Yeah. One rule changed.
Yeah.
And really cool little pieces all of a sudden, right? It was like, oh, look, this Yes. It's not the dog and the car, it's the sword and the axe or whatever. Yeah. Just lackluster. It didn't feel like it was a priority, right? Like all the work was about the contracts that went into the games. All the work of creating the game was done by the lawyers in the room going back and forth. And none of it was done by a game designer saying, this would be the perfect mix, this game and this IP.
Yeah. When we started to see decent games with an IP attached to them, it was always attached to something very familiar to the nerd sector, right? It was the board game people that were playing board games wanted to play board games based on the things they enjoyed.
Right.
And those guaranteed were things like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, like deep science fiction and fantasy type things.
The one that stands out really quickly in my head is Dune from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Today we have a million different kind of Dune games, but that classic Dune game from 1979, with the funky artwork on the cards and little screens and stuff like that.
Asymmetrical powers. It was quite revolutionary for the time.
Yeah, and still holds up, actually, that one. That one really does.
Yeah, they reprinted it recently.
Yeah. So not all 1970s IP games were horrible.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, that one was an Avalon Hill, I believe.
Yeah.
The games were quite innovative for the time. So many of them.
And highly regarded in the board game industry at the time.
Yeah, and still, it wasn't that sort of square board with the squares all the way around it and that empty space in the middle of the square where the cards go.
Yeah, that's right.
It was usually a map of some kind with, territories and things to dispute and fight and negotiate and attack.
Yeah. In the 2000s, we started to see some decent Star Wars games, some decent Lord of the Rings games started to come out. And those games are still around. We're still play some of those.
Yeah. Star Wars Epic Duels is still in my collection.
Nice.
Doesn't feel like a Star Wars game really, but it uses Star Wars characters and you fight. And it's not a bad game.
It's decent.
For the longest time, it was one of the better Star Wars games that there was.
Yeah.
One of my favorites always is Star Wars Queen's Gambit.
Yep.
Based on the worst Star Wars movie. That's still in my collection. I still love playing it. It's probably still, for me anyway, one of the best Star Wars games that exists.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When did that come out? In 2000, actually. Yeah.
Star Wars X-Wing would come out 2012.
Right.
Which people are still playing, that tactical ship combat dogfighting game.
Excellent game.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really well done.
And that one kind of inspired other...
That's right.
Well, no, that's not true.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. It was the Wings of War was the original.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they ported it to Star Trek and Dungeons and Dragons and... Yeah. But Star Wars X-Wing is easily the most popular iteration of that format.
Yeah.
And then Star Wars Rebellion, which came out in 2016 and is, at the time of this recording, number 10 on the Board Game Geek rank system. It's the number 10 board game of all time.
Yeah.
It's Star Wars Rebellion. You can hear us talk about Star Wars Rebellion in more detail in our Board Games Dripping with Theme episode.
I almost feel like that could have been like an Avalon Hill game. You know what I mean? Like it just feels that way. Like you've got this big, huge map.
Yes.
And you're fighting for control of the map and doing things in card-based and
asymmetrical powers.
It just feels like a modern take on the Avalon Hill kind of thing. Yeah. That's an excellent game.
In this era, they started making games like Game of Thrones, like a big, huge, epic Game of Thrones game. And it's been my experience, I've found that particular Game of Thrones game at the thrift shop about 5 or 6 different times. Because it's my working theory that the people who like Game of Thrones see that game on the shelf and think that they're buying Risk or Monopoly.
Yeah.
And they take it home and they open it up and they see the asymmetrical powers and the big rule book and all the little tokens and stuff, and they get overwhelmed and bin it in the donation bin.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And if you like Game of Thrones and you like the game, you can get a good deal now.
That's right. Because a lot of people bought it thinking it was one thing when it was in fact another.
And I think that game also, it's long, it's got a thick rule book for most people.
Yeah. And it's a little mean too, which is something that can be unappealing to some players. So a lot of reasons why it might end up in the thrift shop.
Yeah. You can't talk about games in the 2000s with IPs without talking about Battlestar.
Of course, yes.
Battlestar Galactica, the board game. For the longest time, that was Sherry and I's favorite game.
Yep.
Still love it. Still in the collection.
Yeah.
Still not playing it. But only because it takes 4 or 5 hours to kind of get through a game.
It's a big one, yeah.
Fantasy Flight did a fantastic job with this game. And recreating the theme, I think that's why the game still holds its value as a collector, but also its value as replayability, because if you're a fan of the TV show, then it recreates that tension, that drama, and that theme really, really well.
Yeah, and it was often regarded as one of the best board games. Like, not only just one of the best board games based on an IP, but one of the best board games.
Mm-hmm.
And then, unfortunately, the publisher lost the rights to Battlestar Galactica. So then they re-released it, came up with something Cthulhu-themed, which we often find to be the fallback board game theme for, you want to put Cthulhu or Lovecraftian such and such on there. That's a very popular thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it's free.
Exactly.
I was playing the game Nemo's War last night, which is a solo press your luck sea exploration game based on Captain Nemo, and it is fantastic. There's all this art and there's really great flavor text on all the cards. It really feels very immersive, and the theme is just like popping through, but of course it's public domain, which is tremendous.
Yeah.
So Game of Thrones might be a really bad example of how to get new board gamers into the hobby. And so then we started to see re-themes of actual popular board games, similar to Mario Kart Uno or Game of Thrones Monopoly. Now there was Marvel Splendor.
And that is a much more perfect marriage because the game is very light. It's easy to learn. It's not a 3-hour game. You know, it fits the market a lot better than, the Game of Thrones board game.
So I heard about Marvel Splendor, and it didn't, I'm a huge Marvel fan, but I can't see how the theme is going to marry with those mechanisms that well. I don't know how that works exactly.
I like the idea that it's like all the gems on his glove.
Oh, is that what it is?
I think so.
Oh.
I've never played it. I've heard of it. I've seen it, and I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of neat. Like, I like this whole new audience is going to be introduced to Splendor, which is a fine game, because they're Marvel fans.
Apparently there is a Pokemon version. It's a Korean version of Splendor.
Really?
Yeah, I saw it online. Everybody was just all crazy for it, because that to me seems like a more intuitive marriage, right?
Right.
Because what I know about Pokemon is that you collect them and that they evolve. And that sounds like Splendor to me.
Yeah, that fits.
You're collecting the gems, and then you're using the gems to buy the cards that provide you with a permanent gem. That is very Pokemon to me.
Yeah.
Right? So that is, to me, is a more appropriate marriage of IP and established board game. And have you had a chance to play Bang the Dice game, but the Walking Dead version?
No, I've not played that one. The one I have played was a redo of the game Six Nimit with a Walking Dead re-theme.
No way.
Instead of collecting bulls, you were collecting bullets to kill the zombie cards, which were kind of neat. Yeah.
That's interesting. You're either a fan of The Walking Dead or you're a fan of Bang the Dice game when you pick that out.
It's a weird combination, that's for sure. Like, I like the whole Wild West theme for Bang, but I don't know if Walking Dead makes sense for me. But I've never played it.
Bang the Dice game is a social deduction game, right? So who among us are infected by that? Like, I don't know. Again, I don't know how the theme is going to work, and so I'm reluctant to dive in on that. So the fellas at Asmodee Canada sent us Disney Dixit. And I was surprised at how different the game is when you open it up. It has sort of a different board for keeping track, but everybody's player pawns are a different wooden meatball from a different Disney movie. There'll be like a little black and white Mickey Mouse, or a green and yellow Tinkerbell, or the red panda from Turning Red.
Okay.
And these are the meeples that you use to keep track of score.
Instead of the little bunnies from Dixit. That's cute. That's great.
Yeah. And I much prefer those. I think they're cuter. And because they're all different, there's an appeal there. Also, instead of having 5 or 6 separate tokens, everybody's given a dial, so you can dial in your vote. Instead of fumbling with tokens and having the tokens flip over or whatever, you just think, okay, I'm going to dial in 3, and then you put your dial face down. Your dial matches your meeple, which is really nice. So you've got a Mike Wazowski on the board that represents you, then you've got a little Mike Wazowski decorated dial in your hand for voting. It's really quite clever. Yeah, I like it.
Mike Wazowski. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm not a huge Disney fan, but Dixit is still one of our most played games.
Yeah.
It's a game that you can play with all ages.
Yeah, sold over 12 million copies.
Has it really? That's fantastic. Yeah. Wow. And when you put the two together, Disney and the gameplay of Dixit, which you could already play with young kids, I think it just makes it so much more approachable, and it's going to introduce, modern board games and Dixit in particular to this whole new audience. That makes me really, really excited. Yeah. I can't wait to see them do more with that.
So Dixit is known for having these beautifully illustrated tarot-sized cards that are like dream-like and really trippy. And players are supposed to assign a clue or a hint or a word or a phrase.
Yeah.
And the cards can be really they can be lots of things at the same time, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of strange art, and it always seems as though there's more than one thing happening on those cards.
It's very surreal art. It's things coming out of other things.
Yeah, you would think like a Pink Floyd album cover or something like that. Just like weird.
Yeah.
In the Disney Dixit version of the game, it is similar, but every card is from a different Disney movie. Like you can tell by looking at it, oh, that's a Toy Story card. And you can tell by looking at this card that is a Pocahontas card. And this is Ariel. And there's different scenes and different depictions going on. And there is that sort of trippy, dreamy state to the art. And they're gorgeous tarot-sized cards. But you can tell what movie it's from. And that's going to be a really interesting twist to the gameplay, because in Dixit, you're trying to get some of the players at the table to know what card you're talking about, and some of them to not know what you're talking about. And so with that, I know what movie this is from, are we going to be making vague references to, right? You know what I mean? I'm making like quotes and stuff, or like humming little bars of music.
Yeah.
Hoping that some players at the table might not be able to follow along. That is the part that really interests me about getting this to the table. I really want to try it out to see what that is like.
Yeah, like a clue, like be our guest. It seems like too obvious, right?
That'll be too obvious. Yeah. But if you hummed it, right?
Yeah. I don't know. That's very interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, we got to see how that works.
Yeah. What we're seeing even more recently in the late 2010s, early 2020s is now these gateway games, these family-friendly games, very attainable games based on IPs that use well-established board game mechanisms that we love to play with, and then applying them with the familiar theme.
Yeah, there's a ton of new games based on video games, on books, on TV shows, on toys.
Goonies,
Indiana Jones,
The Princess Bride,
Godzilla,
Harry Potter,
Marvel Comics,
Fast and Furious,
The Thing,
Halloween,
Firefly,
Lord of the Rings,
Star Trek,
E.T.,
Wonder Woman,
Groundhog Day,
Home Alone,
Scooby-Doo.
There's a lot. We could be doing this all day.
And there are so many new games that are coming out all the time based on these intellectual properties that we can't get to all of them and review them quickly enough to really tell you if they're any good or not.
Yeah.
But other people are playing them.
Yeah. I mean, we've read a lot of comments and reviews of so many of these games, and you're hearing good things about not all of them, but a vast majority of them are like, oh, this is so good. Or maybe the game isn't, totally engaging, or it's not innovative in any way.
Yeah.
But it takes the theme and presents it to this new audience in a nostalgic way for those who are familiar with it. And it does it in a fun way, and it makes it really interesting. Unlike those games that we played back in the 70s and 80s that were, ranked 4.2 on BGG.
There's one company in particular that's been at the forefront, this design collective called Prospero Hall.
Yeah.
And they have been making a lot of IP games that are gateway level games, entry level games for families and new gamers that also really capture the theme of the intellectual property.
Yes, they really have. For example, they created the Horrified series of board games.
Yes.
I think there's 3 out now. We talked about the original Horrified on our creepy board games for a scary night episode.
Yeah.
Prospero Hall is responsible for creating those Disney villainous games.
Jungle Cruise.
Back to the Future.
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
The first time I encountered them was Bob Ross' Art of the Chill game.
Nice.
I was at a con and everybody was buying this. Everybody I saw had a copy of this game. I was beside Wood for Sheep at the time, who was a board game retailer locally. And they were selling it and they were sold out. And they were just like, have you played this game? We haven't played this game. I think I need to play this game. Everybody wants it.
That's awesome.
So I was like, oh, I have to play this game. And it's actually quite good. You're not painting anything. You're not learning about painting.
Sure.
But it does have this real chill feeling to it. And you're like, is that because the theme is so chill and it's Bob Ross and you just get this really relaxed kind of way of playing? Or is it because, the mechanics match the theme so well?
Interesting.
I can't really say. I'm not sure. But the game does a really good job of creating a feel for Bob Ross's work that he's created.
Nice. The first time I played a Prospero Hall game was Jaws. Jaws is an action point, hidden movement, team-based shark hunting game for 2 to 4 players, ages 12 and up, that plays in about an hour. Jaws was designed by Prospero Hall and published by Ravensburger in 2019.
What we are dealing with here is a perfect engine, an eating machine.
Dive into the heart-pounding depths of the ocean with Jaws, the board game. An immersive tabletop experience that captures the relentless suspense and thrilling action of the iconic 1975 blockbuster. This is your ticket to the shark-infested waters where danger lurks beneath every wave. Picture this: the tranquil beaches of Amity Island, the sun casting golden hues on the horizon, but beneath the surface, a great white menace is on the prowl. The Jaws board game brilliantly encapsulates the pulse-pounding essence of Steven Spielberg's masterpiece, weaving players into the fabric of the classic tale with every decision.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Feel the tension rise as you take on one of 2 roles: the relentless great white shark or the determined crew out to thwart its terrorizing spree. The asymmetrical gameplay mirrors the cinematic showdown, creating an immersive experience that will have you on the edge of your seat. The game designers at Prospero Hall have expertly translated the film's suspenseful atmosphere into every component. Combined with strategic cat-and-mouse gameplay, Jaws the board game is a masterclass in capturing theme, feel, and sheer excitement of an iconic IP.
Did you hear your father? Out of the water now!
So buckle up your life jacket, gather your crew, and let's head straight to the heart of Amity's treacherous waters.
The shark, swallow you whole.
Jaws the board game, where the theme is as sharp as the teeth that lurk in the shadows. It is hard to understate the cultural impact that Steven Spielberg's 1975 blockbuster had.
Yeah.
I had a Jaws t-shirt and lunchbox as a kid. I was under 5 years old when the movie came out, so I wouldn't have been able to see it. But of course, it was everywhere. It was unavoidable.
I remember having sort of an intense reaction to the commercial, just kind of, just feeling, fear, just dread.
Yeah.
None of man's fantasies of evil can compare with the reality of Jaws.
And I know that it became a thing for a lot of people, like, not wanting to go swimming at the beach anymore just because they went to see Jaws. It was a serious cultural moment, a touchstone for a lot of people.
The Jaws movie was based on the Jaws book written by Peter Benchley. Since the movie came out, both Benchley and Spielberg have expressed regret on that phenomenon of people becoming scared of sharks and a lot of people going out and hunting sharks. It was quite unfortunate.
Yeah.
But it's hard to argue with the cultural significance of that movie.
Yeah.
So there have been a lot of Jaws board games. No less than 6 are on the Board Game Geek website. And I personally owned the 1975 Jaws game.
Oh, did you?
Which was this mouth-snapping, garbage-retrieving dexterity game. It's been since rethemed Sharky's Diner.
Okay.
But you might be familiar with it, right? It's this big plastic Jaws shark with the spring-loaded mouth.
I'm looking at it right now.
And you're going in with a hook and trying to get the things out of the shark's mouth without it like snapping shut on you.
Right. It's a game that I've seen done in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Put this in the whatever's mouth or take it out of the mouth. It's very, very funny.
Yeah.
Sharky's Diner looks like is the new
Yeah.
one. But there is a Jaws version, which is hilarious.
Which is the what I had in 1975.
That's pretty awesome. That would be worth something now, I think.
Yeah, it's gone now. No, but this not to be confused with those games. This particular Jaws board game came out in 2019. So in this game, we're split into two teams. One player plays Jaws, and everybody else plays various players trying to capture Jaws. You have Hooper, Quint, and Brody. So the game is sort of split up into two acts. In the first act, Brody, Quint, and Hooper are driving boats around the island, trying to pin barrels to the shark. The shark is moving from sector to sector around the island hidden, and they have a little cheat sheet in front of them where they write down which beach they are on and where they are. It's interesting. I think that this game is actually themed after the book because there's actually no images from the movie. Like Brody's character card is just the Amity police badge. And Quint is his jacket, right? His army jacket with his name tag showing.
Yeah.
And Hooper is some goggles, like is under the water. And so it's really interesting how we're able to capture the theme without using pictures from the movie. Like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
All the pictures have the same palette, right? These have the same color scheme, like they've been colored the same way. The back of the event cards is the Amity Lighthouse, and it's just a picture of a lighthouse and a sky, right? And it could be like a bright blue sky, but it's not. It's this kind of washed out sky. And I don't know if you remember the movie, but it had that sort of very bright, sort of washed out palette. Like the sky wasn't bright blue, the water wasn't bright blue. It was sort of washed out. It had that sort of 70s look.
Right.
And the board game captures that aesthetic without using the actual images from the movie, which is really interesting.
Cool.
But then on the business side of those cards are sort of almost like a watercolor image, and you could swear it's a screenshot from the movie, but it isn't. It's been drawn. For one example, Amity Island in the news. Any one crew member can take one extra action this round. And the flavor text says, "A cloud has appeared on the horizon of this beautiful resort community. A cloud in the shape of a killer shark." TV news reporter. And then it shows this guy with sort of a microphone in front of him, and he's got those big, wide 70s collars.
Yeah.
You can tell that he's a news reporter on a beach with a bunch of people behind him, but there's just enough detail that you know what it is, but you can't make out what person it was, right? And it just kind of captures the feel of the movie. And all these cards have a different image on them, whether it be the lookout tower or the harbor at night. Very simple images that aren't from the movie, but are made to look like they're from the movie. It's really kind of clever.
Yeah.
So in phase one, we are on the one side of the board where it's the island. The whole board is the island, and there's water all around, divided into sections. And there's 4 beaches, the east, west, north, south beaches. And then beyond that, an additional 8 different sectors that Jaws could be swimming in at any time.
Right.
The Jaws character is moving from one sector to the other sector each round, spending action points. Jaws is going to get 3 action points.
Yeah.
It could move from one sector to another sector, or maybe eat a swimmer, which is really great. So at the beginning of each round, these event cards come out and they dictate where everybody wants to go swimming, which beaches are trendy that day, what the weather is like, how many people are coming out.
Yeah.
And so you take these little tokens that are like a girl on a floaty, or a guy on a little dinghy, or just a guy swimming with a little wake behind him.
Yeah.
And you put all of these tokens in the water on those beaches, and it's Jaws' goal to try to eat as many people as possible in the first act, while Brody, Hooper, and Quint are trying to find him and attach those barrels to him so that they know where he is.
Right.
If Jaws eats 9 people, or if we attach 2 barrels to Jaws, the act ends and we go to act 2.
What I like about this part of the game is there's this real tug of war going on between the two sides, right? I mean, as the shark, you're trying to hide your movement a little bit and be deceptive about where you're going to go, and then pop up and kill as many things and then disappear again as you can. Yeah. And the humans in the game, they have things like binoculars, and they can actually close down a beach.
That's right, yeah.
So that anybody who is swimming in that beach has to come out of the water. So they're trying to stop the shark from getting as many lives as possible.
Yeah,
it's just this really neat tug of war.
Yeah. So there's 2 boats in the water piloted by 2 of the characters, but then one of the guys is on the island getting those barrels to the various docks, like picking them up and moving them.
Yeah.
Everybody has a set of actions that they can do, and then they also have those special actions, like use binoculars or use the fish finder. Right? That sort of thing. There's a little bit of asymmetrical powers, which makes it interesting for everybody, so we're not all doing the same thing.
And those humans have to work together.
Yeah.
Each one of them has a role. Like one guy's loading the boat with barrels, the other guy is picking up barrels, and the other guy's actually shooting the barrels. Like you really got to work together at finding the shark and getting barrels to him.
Yeah. This first half of the game feels very much like the first half of the Jaws movie, where there's that tension and there's some slow bits and it's like, well, where could he be? And we think he's over here. And then someone died. Oh my God, there's blood in the water. It's horrible, right? And then it's quiet again for a little. Well, where could he be? And then it's quiet. Oh no, someone. And then it's just all these little spikes of these horrible atrocities happening throughout. And we're like, man, we got to find that shark. Where could he be? And there's that pressure.
Yeah.
Because the more people that Jaws eats in Act 1, the more powerful Jaws will be in Act 2.
Right.
And so we're trying to stop him as early as possible to make Act 2 a little bit easier.
And also, the better the humans do, the more equipment and weapons they have in Act 2.
Yeah, there's some tools that they can get depending on how well they do at their job. So Act 1 continues until Jaws has 2 barrels attached to him, or if Jaws has eaten 9 swimmers. That's when we flip the board over to reveal a complete ocean and a close-up of the orca, the big boat at the end of the Jaws movie. And our 3 heroes are on that boat. And the boat is actually made up of 8 different tiles. They're all sort of puzzled together into a grid. And they're equipped, like we said earlier, with maybe a hatchet,
a harpoon,
a pistol, maybe a shotgun. Mm-hmm. There's ranged weapons that they can fire at a distance, or close-up weapons, like a big knife.
Yeah.
They're on the boat, and they're sort of in one of those 8 sectors around, and then the resurface cards come up. These resurface cards will give Jaws 3 different options, 3 different sectors to attack. And it gives Jaws a defense value and an attack value. And so there's those 3 variables on each of the 3 cards, A, B, or C. So the Jaws player will pick one of those 3 cards, the A, B, or C, and take a token relating to them and put it face down on the table. And then Quint, Hooper, and Brody will decide which part of the boat they want to stand on and which part of the boat they want to target with their weapons. So everybody knows that Jaws is going to pop up. One of those 3 options are available.
Right.
And so everybody's going to choose based on how many dice Jaws could roll and what the defense that Jaws gets. Because although those variables are going to change from turn to turn. And so he could come from the back and do a really, really powerful attack because he's going to be able to roll all sorts of dice. But Quentin Brody might be targeting that section and be ready for when he pops up out of the water. So it might be better if Jaws came from the front.
Right.
So these are the decisions Jaws player is making. And then Clint, Hooper, and Brody are going to be using their weapons. They're going to say, I'm going to take my shotgun and I'm going to target this area. I'm going to take my baseball bat. I'm going to target that area. And then Jaws will reveal.
I love the image that I have while playing this game. It's the 3 guys basically, surrounded by themselves in the middle of the water, and they're surrounded by this giant shark that just keeps popping up.
Just floating.
And they're leaning over the side, with a hook and a baseball bat, and one guy's got a flare gun that he's going to aim for his mouth, and they're just literally leaning into the water, And then as soon as they turn their head for a second, the big mouth comes up out of the water. It just seems so cinematic. It feels like it's part of one of the movies that you've watched,
The Jaws player has those cards that they earned in Act 1 that they can play during Act 2. For example, if the shark damages or destroys a boat space, each crew member on that boat space takes a wound. So these are like little bonuses. So what you're doing is the shark will attack the side of the boat, and with any luck, in a proper die roll, will damage the boat. When you take that tile and you flip it over to its damaged side, any player standing on that section of the boat will fall into the water and has to take special actions to get back onto the boat.
Yeah.
Or they could get attacked
by the shark in the water. Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, there is player elimination. Each of the players, including the shark, have hit points.
You're stuck in the water with the shark. That's even more terrifying. You might have that baseball bat still, but now you're face to face with this giant shark.
That's right. Easy pickings. Mm-hmm. For me, this part of the game really feels like that last 10 minutes of the movie where the players are being beaten. The ship is literally falling apart. It's very easy for Jaws to damage that boat in a few places.
Yeah.
And you flip the tile over and you see like the big chunks taken out of the boat, and if he attacks it again, you remove the tile completely, and the board underneath shows like little bits of wood floating in the water, like it's like completely gone. And it really feels like you're on your lifeline.
We've played a few games where the shark is literally eaten through the middle of the boat. So people are, hanging on to the top and the bottom of the boat, just trying to stay afloat, and long enough to kill the shark before the end of the game. It's always a very close game too, don't you find?
I do. I always find, for the most part, Jaws is going to lose.
Oh, okay.
And I feel as though the Jaws role is more like a dungeon master kind of role. And they are facilitating the challenge and having fun, causing some damage. And proud to boast that I have won as Jaws once.
Yeah, I have too. Just once.
It is not easy.
No. You're setting up the story.
Yeah.
As the Jaws player, as you're creating the memories that you're all going to take away from this game. Like, remember, I killed Quint. I killed you before I died.
Yeah.
That was awesome. That one scene where so-and-so was floating in the water and they were just beating me with a baseball bat, until I ate them. He was just a head bobbing in the water at the end of the game. Like that kind of stuff. It's a great game.
Yeah. Jaws was originally a book, quickly made into a movie the very next year. And then that same year was a gimmicky toy, a lunchbox, a pinball machine, and so on, a comic book. It just kept going. And now, almost 50 years later, it is this very decent board game.
Yeah.
It's interesting that such an effective adaptation can bring fresh life into the IP again.
Yeah.
The next game we're going to present was also a book, but then was made into a TV show.
I don't think there's a lunchbox. There might be, actually. Yeah, I would say that this is one of my all-time favorite book series.
Nice.
There's a lot of them, so some of them are better than others, but an excellent, very, very rich world was created in these books. Very detailed, very real feeling.
Yeah.
And creating a board game of that world is hard because it is so enormous and it is so big and there are so many moving parts and components to the story that it's hard to create a game that does all that. The Expanse Board Game. The Expanse is a variable player powers area majority tactical space conflict game with multi-use cards for 2 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, that plays in about an hour. The Expanse was designed by Jeff Engelstein and published by WizKids in 2017.
They built their solar system on our backs, spilt the blood of 1 million of our brothers, but in their eyes, we're not even human anymore.
Embark on a journey to the vast reaches of our solar system as we delve into the Expanse board game. Here we will navigate the intricate web of politics, intrigue, and interstellar conflict that mirrors the pulse-pounding narrative of the beloved science fiction series.
Earth and Mars been stepping on the necks of the Belters out here for over 100 years.
In this tabletop odyssey, the board game designer Jeff Engelstein has harnessed the essence of James S.A. Corey's groundbreaking universe, encapsulating the grandeur and the tension of the Expanse in every strategic move.
We are fighting for something precious here.
Picture yourself aboard the Rocinante, hurtling through the cosmos as factions vie for control over the Belt, Mars, and Earth.
What are they trying to protect?
It doesn't matter. They're making a move.
The game's mechanisms echo the delicate balance between diplomacy and conflict, providing players with a front row seat to the power struggles that define this futuristic landscape.
As we speak, the Martians could be preparing a strike all over the system.
The shifting alliances and the looming threat of war are all laid out before you, creating an immersive experience that fans of the Expanse will find both familiar and exhilarating.
Heaven help your enemies.
Heaven help us all.
So suit up in your best Martian armor, consult your data pads, and prepare to navigate the complex web of allegiances in the Expanse board game.
I'm not gonna lie to you. Either way this plays out, you're dead.
I love The Expanse.
Mm-hmm.
It is easily the best science fiction TV show I've seen in a really long time.
Wow, that's high praise. I really enjoyed the TV show. I can't say I have finished it. I think I'm a season behind where it ended.
It didn't maintain its caliber throughout the series, for sure. Like, it started off so strong.
Yeah, I would agree.
But there were bits towards the end that are worth checking out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I did love the books. The books, it just takes it to a whole other level.
Oh, I bet.
Like, it just is so rich.
Yeah.
It honestly, while I was reading it, it just felt real. Like, I felt like I was in this. Like, it was like, oh yeah, they could do this. They could live on the belt. That's possible.
Oh, wow.
And you're kind of reading it going, why aren't we living on Mars, right? Like, why isn't this happening?
The Expanse is so many different things. Like, it's such a great drama, like interpersonal relationships and just the things that are going on. Like, there's some of the best space combat I've seen in a science fiction TV show ever.
Yes.
in that show.
I would agree.
There's this like sneaky plans and mysteries to be solved and, you know, what's really going on and who's pulling the strings and all of this like really fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
That the Expanse board game is not.
Right.
Right? Like there is no complex space combat in the board game.
No.
And there is no interpersonal relationships. Because the Expanse is so many things, it would be impossible to create a board game that is also that many things.
Yeah.
But I find what it really does really, really well is that space conflict, not combat, but sort of interplanetary political push and pull.
Yeah. The way I think of it is it's a bird's eye view of the world.
Yes.
And you're sort of recreating a story within it.
Yeah.
And that's reflected in the board itself, you know, like we talked about in Jaws, is it's an overhead view of space and the planets involved and the ships that are on the board. And you are one of the political leaders in these factions, sort of moving the pieces around the board and hatching your plans as you go along.
Yeah.
A number of different factions. So there's the United Nations, there's Mars, which is the Martian Congressional Republic, and there's the Outer Planets Alliance, the OPA. These are kind of the rebels, the belters that live on the outskirts of society in this deep space, and Protogen, which is the corporation that is developing the protomolecule. And the other part of the game, which plays a big part, the ship, the Rocinante, they aren't a faction. They attach themselves to one of the faction that's in last place. And it does act like a catch-up mechanism.
Yeah.
Thematically works perfect. Talking about the show, like the aesthetics of the show, you had talked about the space battles look fantastic.
Yeah.
I think just the production design, the art direction of the show is fantastic, like incredible.
Agreed.
It just has this really, really rich look to it.
Yeah.
Like the book. Like the TV show does such a good job of recreating the book in less detail, perhaps, but in a visual way that just works so well. And the board game takes that and creates it again with less detail because you're not playing a specific character. You're not going to do all the little plot elements that happen in the show. It's a really, like I said, a grand view or an overhead view of the game and the world. But it does it in such a streamlined way that you still feel like you're part of that world. That sort of, I'm going to plan to do this and everyone else is planning to do their own thing and we're going to clash because of it. And then it's, my plans have to adapt again and change and rework. And it's a card-driven game.
Yeah.
And you're going to be using cards in this sort of multi-use way. The cards come out, they have various strengths and various abilities on them. And the cards also have your factions on them. But not every card has every faction. Some cards just have, Mars and the OPA. Some have the United Nations and Mars on it. Some have 3 of them on it.
Right.
And you're going to buy these cards and play them in a number of different ways. Every card has a number in the top corner that gives you a series of action points. And you can play that card just for the action points. And the action points let you move your troops around. So you can move all of your ships from one big area to another big area.
Right.
Or you can move one ship 2 areas. Or you can create a new ship and then move it or something like that. Yeah. And you divide those actions up amongst it. And basically what you're trying to do is utilize your troops to take over where you see empty spots.
Yeah.
Like, the planet Ceres doesn't have anybody on there. I'm going to put a guy there. Now I have majority, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the other way you can use the cards is they have like an event text or a power text.
Okay.
If your faction's listed, you can do the event. And it will do things like let you remove an influence from one of your opponents or move a ship from this area to another or build a ship in your home base, that kind of thing.
Nice.
If you use the card for the actions, so, this card provides 4 actions, which is great. I can move 4 of my things around.
Yeah.
Now what I'm doing is I'm giving the event text away to one of the other players at the table whose faction occurs. We look at the initiative track and we decide who gets first dibs on it. So for example, I'm Mars and I use the 4 actions because that's really cool. Now I have to give it to the OPA whose faction symbol appears on the event part of the card.
Yeah.
And the OPA guy gets to use the actual event, which is really powerful, which might be like to remove someone's cube of a different color from a different area. It might let them bring out more ships or move ships around, that kind of thing. So there's this real push and pull. And I love the drama of that. Like that's one of my favorite things into any kind of game.
I know.
It's like I get to do this really cool thing that fits well with what I'm going to do, but I have to give this to you? Like the you doesn't matter. In this game, it's a 4-player game. It doesn't matter who it is. But I mean, obviously that's part of your strategy, but you never want to give them this really cool action. And you always want to do both. In every card, there's a cost, and the cost is on the board, and that depends where it is. And the cost is paid for with victory points. So you're literally, hurting yourself to get this card that you want to use. And you basically have to get a card. There's always one you can get for free, like I said.
Yeah.
But if you take the free one, all the cards shift down, so the next one's free.
Exactly.
And eventually that really expensive card becomes free for someone else. So you have to be really careful and make that decision really, really work for you, because either the actions or the event have to be worth what you're going to pay for it in victory points. The other thing you can do with cards is you can hold on to them for future turns that sort of give you this, okay, I like that card. It works perfectly with my faction and what I want to do. But if I use it now, I won't get that many things from it. But if I save it for later on, like just before scoring or something like that, then I can really sort of, hammer it to my opponents kind of thing. And that just makes for a really, really interesting thing.
Though scoring in this game is really interesting too, right? Like you were mentioning.
Yeah. The scoring cards are shuffled into the deck and they come out randomly and they come into the market area where you buy your cards.
Yeah.
And you get to decide when scoring happens. It's your turn. There are 5 cards in the market, and one of them is a scoring card. You could buy or take the free card that lets you do actions or events.
Yeah.
like you normally would, or you could buy the scoring card. And it literally costs the same amount.
And trigger scoring.
Yeah. And you would do that because right now, at this moment, I'm going to score 4 points more than my opponents, or 1 point more, or 2 points more. And that's why you'd want to buy it. So you're going to spend 1 or 2 victory points to get that scorecard
trigger it that
to
much
happen
earlier.
now, to trigger it right now.
Interesting.
But what happens in a lot of games is 2 or 3 of those spots in the market get clogged with scoring cards. The scoring card sits there sometimes for a turn or 2 or 3 because no one's really sure, is this the right time to me to pull the trigger on scoring?
If we just went a little bit longer, I could get a couple more victory points.
Exactly. If we score now, I will have 1 more point than all of my opponents. But if I wait 1 more turn and I play this card that I have in my hand, I'll get 4 more points, and then we can do scoring anytime after that. But of course, none of your opponents want to score when you are at 4 points more. They want to score when it makes sense to them. That's a really neat part of this game. Like, you get to decide when scoring happens. I really love that.
Yeah.
Part of that is also when you pick the scoring card, you also get to choose what sections of the board get scored bonus points. At the beginning of the game, the bonus points are quite low. I think only 1 player gets them. Later on in the game, 2 or 3 players get them, like first place, second place, third place. But you get these little tokens, and there's 2 of these tokens for each sort of area. And those points can really add up because they're scoring more points during the bonus round than the other regions themselves. So if you control those bonus areas and a lot of the other areas, that's when you want to trigger scoring. So that's why it becomes really not confusing, but just sort of this mental exercise of, should I trigger scoring now? But if I don't do it now, Matt's definitely going to do it on his turn. So maybe I'll let him do it, and I'll play this card, which is going to put me in a better position for when scoring happens. And then, of course, I do that, and it comes to you, and you're like, no, I don't want to score now. Chris has got more points than me, and that scoring card sits there, and it takes up a spot. And then another one comes out, and another one comes out. And the game end is triggered when the 6th scoring card comes out. That's really all the game is about. Like, there's not these space battles. It's about, I have 3 guys, you have 2 guys, I have majority, and when scoring happens, I get 4 points and you get 2 points. That's the game. And these cards are used to move your troops around, add more troops, or move more ships or more cubes, and that's it. Like, that's all there is to the game. But it is so meaty and so interesting. Like, you're always like, damn this game. Like, I thought it was going to go this way and it went that way. And I thought I could do this on my turn, but then I didn't factor in what you could do on your turn. And then there's, I saved a card to do this and you saved a card that did that better. And it's like, oh my God, I can't keep track of all the moving pieces. But it's difficult to master, but not difficult to learn or play.
Oh, agreed. Yeah. It's that push and pull where you want to expand your forces. I want to move these guys to those moons and those bases. But if I move them away from Earth, well, then you're just going to take over Earth. So I got to leave one guy behind and make sure Earth is nice and protected. I'm going to move these guys over here. And I don't know, I want it to be too thin. I want to double up over here to make sure that this base is protected. It's really interesting, the decisions.
I absolutely love this game. I got to say, I am not good at it because it's one of those games that when you plan something, you've got to be really prepared for it to not go your way.
Right.
And that's when, poopy pants comes out and I start whining. No, it's really push and pull. Like, I will get a little bit ahead on my turn and I'll be so happy and content with what I did. I didn't get to do everything I wanted, not by a long shot, but I got to do something. It works in with my plan and I moved ahead on the scoreboard. And even that is push and pull because you're paying for the cards with your victory points. So you move back to move ahead.
Yeah.
And then literally my turn's over and it's the next player's turn and they did the same same thing. They moved a little bit ahead. And it's really this sort of race and timing and figuring out when to score and when to move your guys into the bonus region that you want to pick and that kind of thing. It's really, really quite brilliant.
And it takes a minute, right?
Yeah.
If we want to move our forces to Mars, well, we got to get there. And just like in the TV show, it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
Earth and Mars are far away.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. You'd set off with that tactic, but then as your ships are traveling, the game state is going to change and you'll have to adapt. There's never enough time to do everything.
No. And it plays really fast. I think we should mention that it is been called a sort of up to four player version of Twilight Struggle.
Right.
Twilight Struggle is a very, very popular Cold War 2-player game. And The Expanse is sort of a modified, maybe boiled down version that plays 2 to 4 players.
Yeah.
There's also an excellent expansion for it called the Doors and Corners, which is a line from the books and the TV show. And that brings the proto-molecule into the game a lot more and gives you different modules that you can add or subtract to the game once you've sort of mastered it, which will never happen, at least for me.
I do appreciate the board of the expansion more. I think the board is laid out a bit better in that expansion. It's prettier and more intuitive.
Yes, yeah.
So that's definitely one of the components of that expansion that we always play with.
Yes, that's one of the things is people complained about the art in the original game was a little drab. The ships are just cardboard tokens.
Yeah.
I think they were just sort of, silhouettes. The people are cubes,
Yeah.
And the board was, just circles. Like it was like a gray circle. That's Mars.
Right.
And there's a slightly smaller gray circle. That's Ceres. And there's a larger gray circle. That's Saturn. And that one's Jupiter. And the expansion for the Expanse. I think they missed an opportunity to call it the Expanse expansion. But anyway, the Doors and Corners expansion for the Expanse board game has a new board, which I think is almost identical. It just is laid out better. It looks much better. The planets look like planets.
Yeah.
It's colorful. It makes it just a much more pleasing experience and a little easier to find what you're looking for. Like Earth looks like Earth. Jupiter looks like Jupiter.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic game.
It is.
I don't get to play it nearly as much. And I guess that's something we should talk about in, IP games. Is sometimes the IP is a entryway into the game, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm a big fan of Goonies. I can't wait to play the Goonies board game.
Yeah.
Or I love comic books. I want to play Marvel Champions, that kind of thing. But sometimes I've never watched the TV show The Expanse or read the books.
Yeah.
I've heard it's good, but I don't know anything about it. Can I still play this game? And yes, you can. I mean, the answer for any of these, IP games is yes, you can.
Yeah.
But it certainly makes it much more entertaining if you're familiar with the IP.
I think so too, yeah.
As popular as the TV show has been, I just haven't had that much luck finding that many people who are into the Expanse world.
Yeah. Like we said earlier, the Expanse is a lot of different things, but this board game isn't all of those things. It really feels as though you're like the president or whatever in the control room, moving the models around on the big board while all the generals sit around you and go, that's right?
Yeah,
we should move our forces into here. Let's do that. Let's move our forces in. And it feels like that component of the show.
Yeah. There's so much in this game that I love so, so much. I feel like it could easily be rethemed into something else, like,
Sure.
a World War II battle or something like that.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'd probably buy that game as well, because then I could get them both to the table.
And the games that we're presenting today all offer a different pathway to delivering the IP.
Yeah.
Like, I think Jaws is the purest version of this that we're showing today.
Absolutely.
In that it is a simple, attainable game for families while still evoking the theme and feeling of the movie.
Yeah.
That tension. It's such a direct parallel. The Expanse is capturing a small portion of the TV show and books, but doing a really good job. And then it's a little bit of a heavier game. It's not an entry-level game by any means.
Right.
The next game I want to talk about, I feel, is the strongest game that we're presenting in this episode, but again is strong in theme, but not delivering an exact translation.
Right. You're in the world. You're in the experience of the IP, not the actual IP itself. And recreating it isn't as important as just being in the world.
The Godfather, Corleone's Empire. The Godfather, Corleone's Empire is a worker placement, area control, take-that mafia game for 2 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, that plays in about 90 minutes. The Godfather, Corleone's Empire was designed by Eric Lang and published by Simon in 2017. Step into the shadows of the criminal underworld with The Godfather, Corleone's Empire, a board game experience that pulls you deep into the heart of the noir crime era, where loyalty is paramount, allegiances are fragile, and power is the ultimate currency.
Don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Picture the smoky back rooms of 1940s New York, where the Corleone family's influence extends to every corner of the city.
I never wanted this for you.
In this thrilling tabletop adaptation, Eric Lang has brilliantly captured the raw essence of the 1940s gangster mythos, turning each player into a cunning mob boss, vying for control.
Now you want to get mixed up in the family business?
From the sleek, vintage-style components to the evocative artwork, every detail of this game transports you to the gritty, glamorous world of the Corleones.
My father's no different than any other powerful man who's responsible for other people.
Shake down businesses, make backroom deals, and strategically place your family members to secure your grip on the city.
You know my father. Men are coming here to kill him.
The tension is palpable as players navigate the treacherous landscape, mirroring the power struggles immortalized in the film. This is your ticket to the world of mob hits and car bombs, and every decision carries the weight of a family legacy. Are you ready to cement your place in the annals of organized crime? So don your fedora, sharpen your wits, and prepare to make an offer that can't be refused.
Leave the gun. Technical only.
The Godfather, Corleone's Empire.
So, Matt, were you a fan of the Godfather movies as a kid growing up?
You know what? Not at all. I don't remember much of the films. I think I've seen them once a long time ago. I mean, I know that they are remarkable.
Yep.
You know, the greatest achievement in cinematic history, blah, blah, blah. Everyone has blanks, okay? This is one of mine.
That's one of yours, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. In our family, I think it's my great-grandparents were born in Italy. So... not really Italian, but there's some Italian roots there.
Sure. Yeah.
And the first movie, anyway, The Godfather, was this cultural iconic moment for the family.
Yeah.
Like all my aunts and uncles grew up quoting it.
No way.
It was a big part of our history. All of the movies have been watched dozens of times by pretty much everyone. And
cool.
It's a great IP, obviously.
Yeah.
It was a very famous novel by Mario Puzo.
Yeah.
Was turned into The Godfather, the movie, by Francis Ford Coppola, Marlon Brando,
Al Pacino.
Yeah, these guys are titans
Huge
in the industry.
Yeah. In this board game, you don't feel like you're in the movie.
Yeah.
For me, it captures the 1940s crime noir, that aesthetic really, really well.
Yep.
But we are not hitting any plot points in the film as we play through.
No, there's no moment in this game where you feel like, oh, that's just like in the movie, you know?
Yeah.
I remember this scene. I feel just like so-and-so. No, it's not like that at all.
When you're playing Jaws, yes, you will be recreating scenes from the movie, and you'll be there making those decisions at the time. And it really feels like an immersive movie experience. Whereas this game is a area control, worker placement, 1940s gangster movie.
Yeah.
And it's done really, really well.
Exactly.
Every player plays a different mob family, and they all get a handful of miniatures, patriarch, matriarch of the family, and then a couple of goons that come with them. And we're all trying to become the new boss. We're trying to take over New York. It's an area control game. So New York has been divided into different areas. Each of those areas has places you can go, worker placement places you can go. And this is how you corner the market and corner the areas and spread your influence throughout the city.
You muscle your way in.
So the board is New York City, and it's divided into these boroughs. Each of the boroughs has sort of a shade of color to them, which is kind of interesting.
And again, it's like this top-down view. Like you're sort of looking at Google Maps version of this little part of New York.
Yeah, there's all sort of skyscrapers and stuff sort of peeking through. Yeah. You've got Central Park and Queens and Brooklyn, and all the different boroughs are clearly labeled. And then there is different worker placement spots, which are actually the businesses in those different areas.
The other component you have to talk about are the suitcases.
Yeah, each player is given a little metal suitcase, which is what they use to stash their money in. And there are some cards that are going to give them bonus points at the end of the game. So everyone's got these miniatures, little statues, little guys of family members, guys in trench coats and Tommy guns.
Yep.
And then the round tracker is like a little car, which I think is interesting. It sits on one side of the board, and as you complete different phases, you move this little car around. I'm a big fan of games with miniatures, like completely unnecessary. We could have been doing this with cubes, right?
Yeah.
But I do like the Tommy gun and the fedoras and all of that.
Yeah, it's definitely a Simon game, right? Like it's It's got some beautiful sculpted miniatures that aren't really necessary, but somehow they add so much to what you're doing.
Yeah.
This moving them around thing is just so good.
Yeah. So you start off the game with a few thugs and a family member, and the thugs will shake down the front of a business and get them resources. Often it's drugs, money, booze, or weapons. They can use these resources to then complete jobs, and job cards could be muscle in. Spend 2 money to take one of the figurines back from the city and use it again immediately, and you also get $4 for that job. Or intimidation. For 3 money, add one of your control markers to any one turf. Or the very popular car bomb, which costs 3 gun cards, and you get to gun down all enemy player figures in one turf. And again, so these are the different areas of New York that have been divided into districts. The game is split up into 5 phases. In the very beginning of the phase, you put out a new business. So there will be more and more worker placement places to put your guys as the game goes on. And then we take turns putting guys down until we've spent all of our workers or done all of our job cards and nobody has any workers left to place. And then we calculate who has area majority. Like how many guys do you have in Brooklyn? How many guys have you got in Queens? Whoever has the most gets a little token for that region. And this is an important thing that we're going to measure at the end of the game for victory points.
Right.
Then we have an opportunity to get another little bonus card or another little action by bribing some officials. There'll be each act, you'll get some different officials like the police captain or the mayor or whatever will come out, and they'll have like a little special bonus that you can use, and maybe an action or a special power that you can use during one of your turns on the following round. And everybody will take some money and put it in, secretly bid for them. It's a blind auction.
Right.
And whoever spends the most amount of money gets the best card. Any money that you spend is gone. So you want to be very careful about that bid, because money is victory points at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So you don't want to go too crazy, but then again, the police chief could come in handy.
The police chiefs let you move the police chief into a turf, and you can move any one figure out of that turf to another space.
Yeah.
So that's letting you get majority in that area, right?
Yeah. So we are trying to acquire these resources, the money, the guns, the drugs, and the booze. And we're trying to complete job cards that will also give us a little bonus. Job cards are going to give us money, but also maybe another resource or push a guy out, or, right, you can gun down some opponents to try to accomplish those area majority objectives.
Yeah.
At the end of the game, the player with the most blue jobs gets a bonus. The player with the most yellow jobs gets a bonus. The player that controlled Brooklyn the most gets a bonus. The player that controlled... So there's not only is there area control bonuses at the end of the game, there's also set collection bonuses, and there's all these different... It's not point salad by any means.
No.
But there is a lot of different ways where you can make up some points and be, the guy that cornered the shakedown market or whatever.
Yeah. This is my favorite Eric Lang game. Eric is known for very deep, very complex, very interesting games with lots of pieces moving and variable player powers.
Yeah.
And this game has all of that, but I feel like it's done in a way... And again, maybe it's the theme for me, right?
Yeah.
The theme works really well,
yeah.
So I love it that much more. But I feel like it's done in a way that just makes it a little bit more accessible than some of his other games.
Yeah, it feels streamlined to me. Like it really feels like it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Each of the different phases click together and the game really moves.
Yeah.
Worker placement games are kind of straightforward. Once you know what all the spots do, then it's just a matter of where you're going to put your guy. And so I find that that's like an easy decision space from turn to turn to turn, but it's the strategy, of course, of like what my decisions I do on this turn are going to affect my decisions on the next turn and what my opponents are going to be doing and where they're going to be moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant game. It's a beautiful game. Like the artwork, like Jaws, is not based on the movie at all.
Right.
It's more, I guess, the book. It's drawings. There's no, screen captures from the movie. It's all drawings of the characters.
Yeah. The police captain or the mayor or whatever. Yeah.
The mayor. Yeah. The sculpts and the miniatures are beautiful, like we'd mentioned. It just adds so much to the game. It's quite good.
So it's interesting that this, for me, is one of my favorite area control games. It's one of my favorite Eric Lang games. But I don't come back to this game because it's The Godfather.
No way.
Right? I'm not attracted to it because, I want to be back in that world.
Right.
I'm not that familiar with the IP, but I am familiar with the era. It brings me back to that. It definitely harkens back to those times, the Tommy guns and the car bombs.
Yeah, I find the opposite, actually. I'll find people go, oh, The Godfather, sitting on my shelf. They'll be like, oh, what's that game like? And that's why it comes out more than, I want to play the game again. It's more the theme that seems to bring it to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's just because my family in particular have a penchant for this movie.
Well, it's a great game for that because it's such a good game, because the turn order, the sequence is so intuitive. It's really easy for new players to catch on.
Yeah.
And then remember again, if you want to, 6 months later, we get it out again. Oh, yeah, I remember how this works.
Yeah, it flows really quickly.
It does, yeah.
Really easily. And
it's very elegant.
Yeah, this one still stands out for me as my favorite because I feel like it does what those games do, like you said, in a streamlined way, in less time. Yeah. And I'm more likely to get a game of The Godfather played 3 times or 4 times a year than I am, 4 games of Rising Sun, which takes, 2 or 3 times longer.
Yeah. Have you played any of the games that we've talked about today? What's your favorite game based on an IP? Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to the Escape into Board Games podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Escape into Board Games. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. It helps more people discover Escape into Board Games. You can get an Escape into Board Games t-shirt at geekygoodies.com/escape. Or you can help us fuel the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/escape into BGS.
This episode is produced by Matt McKenzie and Chris Cormier. Sound editing by Matt McKenzie. Production assistance by Sherry Cormier. Music by John Yasut, Daniel Carlton, and Roman Senyek. See you at the next Escape.